Jasmine Crockett shuts down. Trump with one sentence that left the room, speechless. Trump and his defenders thought they had the upper hand until Crockett calmly dropped a truth so sharp, even they couldn't find the words to respond. The chamber was hot, not from temperature, but from tension. You could feel it through the cameras, the way people shifted in their seats, clutched their pens a little tighter, tapped restless fingers against wooden desks. Washington, D.C. had seen its share of chaotic hearings, but something about this one felt different. The air was heavy charged. They were in room 2141 of the Rayburn House Office Building. And everyone present knew the next few hours wouldn't just be about policy. They'd be about power, truth, and reputation. The hearing was supposed to be a discussion about recent ethics violations in political leadership. But, as always, when the topic turned toward Trump, the temperature rose like steam locked in a kettle. C-SPAN had already clipped together a supercut of jabs and finger-pointing from both sides. Committee members from Arkansas, Florida, and Tennessee were in rare form, deflecting from the rally controversy with tired lines about fake news and media. Witch hunts, a few Democrats fired back, frustrated by the rehearsed deflections. Representative Jasmine Crockett hadn't said a word, she just sat there listening, taking it all in her fingers, moved, occasionally scribbling a note, underlining something in red. But mostly, she watched, observed her eyes. Followed each speaker like a litmus test, checking for honesty, for sincerity, and not finding much. Chairman Reynolds banged the gavel twice, his voice strained but still trying to maintain order. "We're not here to argue about campaign rallies," he said, not fooling anyone. "We're here to assess accountability within leadership." But that line was paper thin, and everyone knew it. Representative Alden Keith, a Republican from Mississippi, leaned forward, smiling like he was backstage at a comedy club. "If we're going to start judging people on tone, we better get ready to empty half this room," he said, chuckling to his own bench. A few on his side laughed, but Crockett didn't. She didn't even blink next to her. A young aide, barely out of grad school, leaned over and whispered, "You want me to update the file with Keith's remarks?" She nodded once. "Do it." That was it. One word, calm, controlled, but something about the way she said it made her aide sit straighter in his seat. 2 rows behind them, someone sneezed, another coughed, but no one moved to break the rhythm of the verbal sparring happening up front. Then came Representative Marla Denzin from Arizona. Tall blonde, always camera ready. She straightened her blouse, cleared her throat like a cue, and launched into a long, winding speech defending Trump's rally remarks as unfiltered expression of frustration. She spoke as if she were reading a script written with Fox News. Talking points. Crockett's pen stopped moving, her hand stilled. She didn't sigh, didn't interrupt, but her jaw tensed for the first time. Denzin ended with, "We've all said things in the heat of the moment. The former president is no different." And just like that, it was quiet again. Quiet. Not silent, but waiting. Chairman Reynolds looked down at his list. He paused. The chair now recognizes Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas. Every head turned, some leaned back, ready for theatrics. Others rolled their eyes, but a few leaned in. Just slightly, they knew what might be coming. Crockett placed her pen on the table. She adjusted the mic gently, not rushing, not dragging it out, just intentionally. Then she looked up first at the chairman, then at the Republican bench. Her gaze wasn't angry. It was focused. "I've been listening," she said. Her voice was even, but somehow heavier than all the noise before her. "And I think some of us are more worried about defending feelings than facing facts." Someone shifted in their seat. Papers rustled, but she continued. "Because when truth feels like an attack, that usually means we're hiding from it." No dramatics, no yelling, just facts, spoken slowly, clearly, like someone flipping on a light. But the real light was still coming. It happened in Grand Rapids, Michigan, just 6 days before the hearing. A Trump rally that was supposed to be another boilerplate stop on the campaign trail ended up becoming the focal point of national controversy. The venue was packed, Roughly 12,000 people, shoulder to shoulder in the converted convention hall. Flags draped every visible wall. The energy was loud, rowdy, predictable, until it wasn't. Trump stood behind the podium, grinning wide. Basking in the applause, he started with familiar jabs. Biden's age, fake indictments, China inflation. But then he veered. And if you're not loyal, he said, gesturing to the camera crews, then you're part of the problem. We don't need more weaklings pretending to serve the people. We need warriors who fight for the right people. The crowd roared. Some chanted, others just screamed. But what rattled people didn't come from the surface level. Noise. It was a sentence Trump let out halfway through his rant, a line that hadn't been seen on any teleprompter. He leaned in close to the mic. They keep calling for accountability. What about theirs? What about the people? Who want to destroy everything we built? I say we handle them the old-fashioned way. A pause just long enough for it to hang in the air. He didn't say who they were. He didn't have to. The crowd erupted, people pumped fists. One woman held up a sign that read, "Bring back the real." America phones went up. Hashtags exploded within hours. Clips of the moment were everywhere. News outlets played it on loop. Analysts debated whether he had incited violence again. But for Jasmine Crockett, it wasn't about the volume. It was about the words behind the noise. She rewatched the clip 4 times that night, each time catching something new. The timing, the crowd's escalation. The way his tone sharpened when he said, "old-fashioned way." She leaned back in her chair, laptop glowing in the dim light of her Capitol Hill apartment. She clicked open a folder labeled January 6th. Fallout, dozens of documents stared back. Transcripts, video stills, internal memos. The patterns were impossible to ignore. Trump wasn't just stoking outrage. He was testing how far he could take it again. She called her aide, Luca, at 11:17 p.m. "You still awake?" "Barely." Luca replied, groggy. "I need you to cross-reference the Grand Rapids clip with the speech from Tallahassee last year and check if any of the same phrasing pops up in Proud Boys' message boards." He didn't question. It just said, "Got it?" The next morning, her office buzzed with quiet urgency. 2 interns sifted through legal documents. A junior researcher flagged connections between the rally speech and a memo sent out by a PAC 2 days before. By 10:00 a.m., she had what she needed, a paper trail of inflammatory rhetoric layered over time, strategically framed to trigger anger without naming names, plausible deniability. This wasn't just political theater. It was a blueprint, and it had worked before, but Crockett wasn't interested in grandstanding. She wasn't looking to go viral. What she wanted was much simpler and far more dangerous in a room full of politicians: accountability. So when she sat silently through the opening statements at the hearing, it wasn't because she had nothing to say. It was because she wanted to be the last voice. They remembered. The others came with sound bites. Crockett came with receipts, and as she prepared her remarks, she didn't rehearse them in the mirror. She didn't pace or psyche herself up. She printed one sheet, just one, and circled a single sentence on the bottom. "If telling the truth makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's not me you're angry with. Maybe it's the mirror." She read it out loud once, then tucked it into her folder outside the Capitol media vans parked along Independence Avenue. Protesters on both sides clashed behind barricades. The temperature on the street matched what was happening inside, boiling with no room for middle ground. Inside, she waited, still focused, because when it was her turn, she knew exactly what she was going to say and why. But before she could say it, the gloves had to come off. By the time Thursday rolled around, Jasmine Crockett had been running on caffeine conviction and a relentless paper trail. Her team was used to long days, but this week felt different. Nobody said it out loud, but there was an energy in the office, tight-focused, almost like they were preparing for a trial. Her chief of staff, Dana Hollis, slid a folder across the desk. "This just came in from the Oversight Records request. It's worse than we thought." Crockett skimmed the page's communications between a sitting lawmaker and a private strategist. Tied to two pro-Trump nonprofits' coordinated language talking points direct overlap with Trump's Grand Rapids speech. "They're not even hiding it," she muttered. "Nope," Dana replied. "They're counting on distraction." Crockett leaned back in her chair, eyebrows drawn. "We're not giving them one." She pulled her legal pad toward her and started outlining key dates. Quotes. Names every line, had a purpose. She wasn't there to trade insults, she was building a case. Luca entered the room with a stack of printed screenshots. "The line you asked about the old-fashioned way it's been posted in 3 militia group forums. They treat it like a call sign." She looked at the papers, nodding. "Once that's what I needed by 3 p.m. The office conference room looked like a scene from a true crime documentary. Sticky notes on the walls, timeline stretching from January 2020 to present red ink circling speech excerpts. But this wasn't a game. This wasn't about making a splash on social media. This was about drawing a line between noise and harm, between opinion and manipulation. Dana glanced at her phone. "Reynolds' staff says they're going to try to limit your time tomorrow. They're giving more minutes to Denson, and Keith Crockett didn't look up. Let them. I only need 5. She meant it that evening as the sun dipped behind the Washington Monument. Crockett walked out of the office, leaving most of her team behind. Luca offered to drive her home, but she shook her head. "I need the walk." She took Constitution Avenue headphones and phones, silent, just thinking. At the corner of First and Independence, a woman stopped her middle-aged navy blue cardigan, holding a bag of groceries. She hesitated, then said, "I saw you on the floor last month when you spoke about that veteran housing bill. You were the only one who didn't talk in circles." Crockett smiled, genuine but tired. "Thank you." The woman looked down at her bag, then back up. "Just don't let them make you smaller. They're good at that." Crockett paused, let the words settle. "I'm not shrinking," she said. "I'm sharpening." That night, she sat at her kitchen table with a legal pad in front of her and the city blinking faintly outside the window. Her dog Mika, a stocky old bulldog mix, snored on the couch. She wrote slowly. Not scripting, just framing her thoughts. She thought about that woman with the groceries, about Dana's worry, Luca's research, and the thousands of comments flooding her inbox. Some cheering, some threatening. They didn't scare her, not anymore, but they reminded her why her words had to land, because the people watching weren't just voters. Some were single moms raising kids who'd never seen a politician speak plainly. Some were teenagers being told to stay quiet. Some were just tired. Tired of the noise. She circled a sentence at the bottom of her notes. Then she closed the pad and got some sleep at 6:20. The next morning, she arrived back at the office. Hair tied back, black blazer, one folder in hand. "Ready?" Dana asked. "Let's go in the elevator." "Ride down to the parking garage," Luca whispered. "You think they'll try to interrupt Crockett?" Didn't blink. They can try. But by the time she took her seat at the hearing table, she wasn't preparing anymore. She was waiting. The hearing resumed at 9:03 a.m. The committee room was at full capacity. Every seat filled, every camera pointed forward, press badges hung like medals around reporters' necks, and more than one aide pretended to organize papers while secretly recording on their phones. Crockett was already in her seat, eyes steady, posture relaxed but intentional. She wore a deep navy suit, unassuming but sharp. Her only accessory was the thin gold pin at her lapel, a gift from her late grandmother. It always reminded her who she really worked for. Representative Alden, Keith wasted no time reclaiming the floor, loud, confident, and just condescending enough to sound rehearsed. "I think what's happening here is a manufactured drama," Keith declared, waving his hands like a stage actor, trying to spin the words of a former president into a doomsday prophecy. "Honestly, it's getting old. The American people are tired of political theater." Crockett tilted her head slightly, the way a teacher might when a student tries to turn in someone else's work. Then came Representative Denson. She leaned forward, using that slow, deliberate cadence. that always made her sound more sincere than she actually was. "No matter what your politics are," she said, locking eyes with one of the cameras, "we have to admit President Trump connects with the heart of America." Are his words perfect? No. But perfect words never changed anything. Passion does. Someone from the back clapped once before, being shushed. Crockett said nothing. She flipped open her folder and removed one sheet. Her notes. She didn't shuffle them for effect. She just placed them on the desk. Face up. Chairman Reynolds sighed. He was already starting to look like a referee in a fight he no longer wanted to officiate. "I believe Representative Crockett has been patiently waiting." He said, "The floor is yours." She didn't speak right away. She adjusted her mic, letting the static quiet fill the room. Then she looked up, not at her colleagues, but straight into the row of reporters sitting on the right wall. "When I was growing up in Dallas," she began, "my mother told me something I never forgot. You don't need to yell to be heard. You just need to tell the truth." Some rolled their eyes. Others leaned in. "So, let me tell it." She pulled a printed email from her folder. This is a communication dated February 8th between a staff member of Representative Keith and a PAC strategist. The subject line is language for rally alignment. In it, there's a request to mirror the tone used by former President Trump at a January event in Florida. Keith shifted a camera, clicked in the distance. She continued reading without rushing. And I quote, "Push strong emotional cues, strong emotional. Use fight, take back, and old ways to reinforce strength. Avoid passive messaging." She looked up. That's not passion, that's planning. Denizen raised her hand, but Crockett didn't stop next. Let's look at timing. The Grand Rapids speech was delivered just 2 days after this memo circulated to 5 different congressional offices. Suddenly, we hear nearly identical phrasing across 3 lawmaker statements. That week, Madam Chair Denzine interrupted. Is this an ethics hearing or a conspiracy forum? Crockett didn't flinch. She addressed the chair. If someone's uncomfortable, I suggest they challenge the facts, not the person bringing them. Reynolds adjusted his tie. Let the representative finish. Crockett turned back to her notes. We're not here to litigate feelings. We're here because language matters. It shapes how people act. And when a former president uses language that lines up almost word for word with talking points circulated through government channels, that's not coincidence. That's coordination. You could hear someone breathing through their nose. In the second row, that's how still the room was. Crockett looked around slowly. Her voice lowered just slightly. Because when truth feels like an attack, that usually means we're hiding from it. No one spoke. No one moved. Then she let the silence breathe. And just when it felt like the moment might pass, she leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Eyes locked on the Republican bench. If telling the truth makes you uncomfortable, she said, every word measured. Maybe it's not me you're angry with. Maybe it's the mirror. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded, but what happened next proved that the sentence wasn't just powerful. It was surgical. Silence isn't always quiet. Sometimes it's heavier than any shouting match. And in that room packed with politicians, aides, cameras, and notepads, that silence hit like a collapse. For 3 full seconds, nobody breathed loud. Not Keith, not Denzin, not even Reynolds, who'd been bracing for chaos all morning. You could practically feel the heat behind the eyes of every person in that room, who had just been called out without a single name spoken. Crockett didn't smirk, didn't lean back like she'd just scored. She simply let the moment sit there, doing its work. That sentence wasn't meant to be flashy. It was meant to be a scalpel. Clean, precise, and impossible to ignore. Somewhere in the back row, an intern dropped a pen. That sound snapped a few people out of their trance, but still no one spoke. Then slowly, Representative Keith let out a sharp exhale and shifted in his seat, clearly preparing to strike back. He adjusted his microphone and started with all due respect, but Crockett raised one finger. Let me finish. Her tone wasn't aggressive, but it was final. Even Reynolds didn't interrupt. She continued, "We have a duty to serve, not to spin. I didn't come here to accuse anyone of being un-American. I came to point out how far we've strayed from honesty, and that distance, it's not just measured in words, it's measured in consequences." She tapped the edge of her folder. January 6th was not an accident. It was the result of letting rhetoric run unchecked, of letting people talk tough on microphones, then pretend they meant something else, the moment it got real. Keith tried again. "Madam Chair, this is beyond the scope." Reynolds cut him off this time. "You'll have your turn." Alden, that was rare. Reynolds didn't like to break formality, but something about the shift in the room had reached him too. He looked at Crockett just for a second, with something between surprise and quiet recognition. Representative Denzin began scribbling notes furiously. Lips pressed into a hard line. 2 chairs down, Representative Garber, a moderate from Pennsylvania, who rarely said much at all, raised his eyebrows and whispered to the colleague beside him, "She's not wrong." Reporters in the room, those who were smart, already knew they'd just witnessed. The moment of the day, some began typing what they could remember. Of the, quote, others texted editors requesting priority space on the homepage. Dana, sitting behind Crockett, blinked at the table, then looked up, a small, proud breath catching in her throat. And Luca, he was already editing the clip on his phone. The hearing went on. Technically, Keith gave a long-winded rebuttal filled with vague legal language and appeals to free speech. Denzin tried to recenter the conversation around respectful discourse while completely avoiding Crockett's points, but the power had already shifted. You could hear it in the lack of applause, the nervous half-laughs that didn't come. It was like the wind had changed and no one had brought a jacket. Reynolds moved the discussion along, trying to reset the atmosphere, but it was pointless. Whatever came next would be an afterthought. The room had already been broken open by the time the hearing adjourned for lunch. The clip was live on 2 cable news channels, trending on X and already pulled into TikToks, with dramatic piano underscoring. One version had a caption in white text. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. Crockett packed her folder. Slowly, she didn't rush. She didn't linger outside the chamber. Reporters swarmed. "Congresswoman, was that line planned?" She paused, looked at the cameras. No. She said it was true. But truth has a way of echoing louder than sound bites, and that echo was just beginning. By the time the committee reconvened, an hour later, the room felt different, tighter. Like everyone was being careful with their volume. Even the page who refilled water pitchers moved quieter than usual. Keith came back from the break, looking irritated eyes flicking toward Crockett. Every few minutes, he didn't say anything to her. But the way he flipped through his binder felt more like fidgeting than focus across the aisle. Denzin was on her phone. She wasn't scrolling. She was watching something again and again. It was the clip. Crockett's sentence. The one already being quoted on morning news tickers. "Maybe it's not me you're angry with. Maybe it's the mirror." It wasn't just sound bite gold, it stung. Representative Garver. The quiet moderate broke the tension first, as the next agenda item started. He leaned over toward Crockett and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "You didn't just call them out, you froze them." Crockett looked up from her notes, but didn't reply. She didn't need to. Garver leaned back, half smiling, like he'd just witnessed the magic trick, one he hadn't expected to believe in. As the hearing trudged through policy items and routine motions, the impact of her words lingered. Members stumbled through statements. Their language grew cautious. They stopped using loaded phrases like witch hunt or patriotism under attack. They avoided eye contact when referencing January 6th. It wasn't fear, it was exposure. Crocker didn't gloat. She just observed, like someone watching a shaken snow globe slowly settle. Meanwhile, outside the hearing room, things were heating up. Fast, journalists gathered in hallways, tweets circulated, quoting the line a CNN Chiron read, Crockett to GOP, maybe it's the Mirror, cable shows, began cutting to clips from the hearing with live commentary, debating the ethics, the implications, the tones. But more than that, people were reacting, not to what Crockett accused, but to what she didn't say. No finger pointing, no raised voice, no dramatic gesture, just a mirror held up steady inside. Reynolds tried steering the room back to its agenda. We'll now address Committee, Note 7, regarding PAC funding disclosures, but nobody cared. Even staffers had one eye on their phones. Denson leaned toward Keith, voice low. She's already been quoted in 4 outlets. Keith's mouth tightened. Let them quote. This will blow over. But even he didn't sound convinced. What rattled them wasn't just that Crockett had struck a nerve. It was that she'd done it so cleanly, with no theatrics, like someone sliding a card across the table and walking away. Reynolds finally called for closing remarks. A few representatives droned through their standard rap, UPS full of recycled words like unity, partisan noise, and moving forward, the usual gray suit filler language. Then it came back to Crockett. Reynolds looked up. Congresswoman. Crockett, would you like to offer final remarks? She stood slow and deliberate. I don't need to repeat myself, she said calmly. I think the facts speak louder than I can today, but I'll leave you with this. People are watching, not just voters, not just pundits. Kids, parents, teachers, veterans. They're listening to what we normalize in this room. And if we can't be honest here, we have no right to expect honesty from the country. That was it. No mic drop, just truth. Reynolds looked down at his notes, gave a quiet nod, and adjourned as members filed out. A few offered polite nods. Her way, Garver even gave her a quiet thumbs up, but most Republicans avoided eye contact. Not out of shame, out of strategy. They knew they couldn't touch what just happened without looking petty. Back in the hallway, Luca walked beside her, visibly buzzing. You know, they're going to spend the next 48 hours trying to spin it. Right? I know, Crockett replied. Dana joined them, reading her phone. You've been invited on 3 networks, MSNBC, CBS, and Surprise Fox. Wants a comment. Crockett smiled. Tell them all the same thing? I said, what needed to be said. I'm not here for a rematch, but the media wasn't looking for a rematch. They were already preparing the victory reel by nightfall. The moment had escaped the walls of Capitol Hill and taken on a life of its own. Clips of Jasmine Crockett's statement hit every major news network. The sentence, maybe it's not me you're angry with. Maybe it's the Mirror had gone from a single line in a congressional hearing to the headline on every screen in America. CNN played it every half hour with a glowing red banner beneath House Rep Crockett Stunn's room. With Straight Talk on Truth over on MSNBC, they ran a side-by-side comparison of Crockett's delivery versus Trump's rally rhetoric, with analysts calling her the voice of reason in a house full of noise. Even Fox News covered it, though their headline read, Crocker sparks controversy with Mirror-line critics say. It's personal, not policy. That didn't stop the clip from playing over and over, and it didn't stop people from reacting on TikTok. Young creators stitched the clip with comments like, this is what accountability looks like. Teachers, veterans, nurses, people far outside the world of politics began sharing their own takes. Some called it a wake-up call. Others just said it felt like someone finally said what they've been screaming at their TV for years. Hashtags exploded. Mirror moment. Crockett was right. Say it plain, one post a simple black screen. With her quote, in white text reached 2 million views. In under 6 hours, a young woman in Portland used the audio to narrate a montage of her father's journey as a whistleblower in local government in Detroit. A retired librarian used the clip to caption her video about misinformation in her church community. It hit across generations, across party lines, and that was the part no one saw coming at a bar in Columbus, Ohio. 2 men, one wearing a MAGA hat, the other in a Union jacket, watched the clip muted on the screen above the bar when the line appeared in captions. Neither spoke for a while. Then the man in the MAGA hat grunted. "She ain't wrong. Didn't think I'd hear you say that." The union guy replied, "Doesn't mean I like her." The first man said, "Just means she ain't wrong." In Jackson, Mississippi, a group of high school students played the clip in a civics class. One kid raised his hand and asked, "So if politicians know they're being dishonest, why do they keep doing it?" His teacher just said, "Because they count on people not paying attention." The kid looked back at the screen. She made it hard, not even comedians picked it up. Late-night hosts replayed the line with mock dramatics, but then backed off because the moment wasn't a joke. It carried too much weight to be flattened into a punchline. By morning, Crockett's office had received over 11,000 emails, most of them thank yous: a pastor in Kansas, a corrections officer in Ohio, a woman in Montana who'd never voted before. And then there were the other messages, the hate mail, the threats, the veiled warnings that always found their way in when someone, especially a black woman, spoke too clearly. Dana sorted them quickly. "We've flagged 6 serious ones. I already looped in." "Capitol Police?" Crockett didn't flinch. She just asked any from constituents. "Not one." She nodded. "Then they don't matter." By mid-afternoon, Crockett was trending on platforms she didn't even use. Her quote had been printed on T-shirts framed in graphic art, quoted in podcast episodes, repeated by retired generals and high school debate captains. But it wasn't about her anymore. It was about the sentence, the mirror. It resonated because people were tired of feeling gaslit by power, tired of watching headlines twist shift, then disappear. Crockett's sentence was more than a clap back. It was a confrontation, and for once, it wasn't reactive. It was precise, intentional. Still in the middle of the praise, Crockett sat in her office with the door half closed, scanning the news, sipping cold coffee. Dana entered with a tablet in hand. "CBS wants you tomorrow." Sunday morning. Live Crockett kept her eyes on the screen. "Tell them I'll only come if they're asking about policy, not personalities." Dana raised an eyebrow. "That's a tough ask. I'm not here to become a soundbite." Crockett said, "I want people to remember what I said. Not just that I said it, but there were people already trying to twist the message, and they were about to get louder." By Saturday morning, the pushback had begun. Crockett's sentence wasn't just echoing. It was interrupting. It had seeped into press briefings, Sunday show, rundowns, and dinner conversations in places where political lines weren't drawn in pencil, but carved into concrete, and that made Trump's camp nervous. It started subtly. A few aligned pundits on conservative radio began framing the moment as performative. Words like scripted, calculated, and divisive began surfacing across right-leaning outlets, but it didn't stick, not right away, because it was hard to argue with a sentence that didn't even name anyone. Still, by Monday, the tone shifted harder. Sharper, a Trump-aligned PAC released a statement accusing Crockett of targeted harassment against Republican lawmakers using weaponized language meant to provoke division. The irony didn't go unnoticed. Keith tweeted a screenshot of the hearing and captioned it, "Another desperate Democrat looking for her viral moment." That's not leadership, that's theater. It got 8,000 likes. But the replies told a different story. Then why couldn't you answer her facts? You had a mic. You had time. You said nothing. She didn't call you out by name. Why so defensive? Denson went on a morning show and tried to shift the focus. The Congresswoman made some interesting points. She said with a smile too polished, but she also escalated tension during a hearing meant for bipartisan cooperation. We have to ask ourselves, what's more important, speaking the loudest or making progress? Crockett watched that clip on mute, sipping tea in her kitchen. The question didn't bother her. She'd already answered it with clarity. Still, Dana paced the hallway outside her office, reading headlines aloud. Fox is running a panel tonight, titled, "Did Crockett Go Too Far?" Keith's staff posted a meme of you holding a mirror, like it's a weapon, and Newsmax is saying you're part of a radical truth. Offensive, whatever that means. Crockett didn't even look up. Let them talk, but this isn't just talk. Dana said, "This is strategy. They're trying to drown the message by turning it into noise." "I know," she replied, finally looking up, "but they're doing it loud because they don't have anything stronger." And she was right. Every time they tried to dismiss her, the clip played again. Every time they called her emotional, the facts resurfaced. She hadn't attacked personalities. She challenged patterns, and that was harder to spin. Still pressure, mounted emails from colleagues started to trickle in. One read, "Jasmine, your statement was powerful. But just be aware, leadership's getting antsy, too much attention." Another said, "We support you. But we're being asked if you're planning to go rogue again." Next week, Crockett showed both to Dana. "They want me to shrink." Dana tilted her head. "You won't." "No," Crockett said. "But they are going to keep trying." Later that night, an unexpected invitation came in an appearance on the table, a major Sunday political roundtable hosted in Los Angeles national audience. Live, heavy hitters, and usually reserved for more senior reps or senators. Dana called her the minute she saw the invite. "This is different. It's not just a soundbite panel. This is full segment, long-form conversation. You'll be sitting next to former governors, national journalists. People with pull." Crockett didn't hesitate. "Book it." But Dana paused. "Just know they're going to try to box you in. Make it about the drama, the moment, not the meaning." "Then I'll bring it back to the meaning," she said calmly. "If they want to talk about the mirror, I'll ask why they're avoiding their reflection." Dana smiled. By Friday, the studio was prepped. She flew into Burbank quietly. No entourage, just Luca and a stack of folders in her shoulder bag. Backstage, a producer leaned in and asked, "Any topics you'd rather avoid?" "Just one." "Crockett," said the producer, blinked. "Which one?" Pretending like we're not in the middle of a leadership crisis. "I'm not here to entertain. I'm here to tell the truth." But the next voice she'd hear on that stage wasn't just any critic, and it would challenge her more than she expected. It was late, nearly 11:30 p.m. in D.C. The office lights were off, except for the dim glow in Jasmine Crockett's corner room. Everyone else had gone home hours earlier. But she was still there, half sitting on the windowsill watching headlights streak across the Capitol parking lot. The segment on the table had aired just hours ago, and by all accounts she'd handled it exactly the way she intended, direct, composed, factual. But even as social media buzzed with praise and screenshots, her mind wasn't on the applause. Her phone rang private number. She stared at it for a moment. Most private calls meant trouble, or at the very least someone looking to stir it. But something told her to answer. She pressed, "Accept Representative Crockett." The voice was low. Raspy male, older, familiar, though not entirely expected. "This is Jasmine." She replied, alert but calm. "It's Stephen Kellum. I'm not calling in any official capacity." Kellum, Republican, mid-70s from Iowa, had been in Congress longer than some staffers, had been alive, known for being rigid but respected. Crockett had only spoken to him once, and even then it had been passing. She sat up straighter. "I wasn't expecting your call, I imagine." "Not," he said, then paused. "I saw the clip, the hearing, the coverage." She waited, letting him find his words. "You said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about." He continued, "Maybe it's not me you're angry with. Maybe it's the mirror that one hit." She said nothing. "I'm calling because I want to admit something." He said, "Not publicly, not in front of cameras, just to someone who might actually care what it means." She stayed silent, not out of strategy, just listening. "I was there when Nixon resigned. I remember the silence in that chamber, the shame that hung in the air. But I also remember thinking we'd learned something, that we'd course correct." Another pause. "But lately, I've been voting out of habit, out of fear. Maybe fear of being the one who breaks ranks, who tells the truth when it's not convenient." Crockett closed her eyes for a second, not expecting the weight of what he was saying. "I've defended things I shouldn't have." He said, "I've kept quiet when I knew better. I don't know if you meant for that line to hit people like me, but it did. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. I didn't have anyone specific in mind. She said just the pattern, the silence, the doublespeak. I know, he replied, and that's why I'm calling another pause deeper this time. I'm retiring at the end of this term. He said that's not public yet. But before I go, I want to do one thing. Right? I want to co-sponsor that ethics reform bill you proposed last quarter. Quietly, if you'd prefer. Crockett blinked. That bill had been stalled for months. No Republican had touched it. I don't want quiet, she said. I want honest? Kellum gave a dry chuckle. That's harder to come by these days. I know, that's why I keep asking for it. Silence again. Then you've got people listening now. He said more than you think. Don't pull back. Not now. I wasn't planning to. He sighed. Not the tired kind, but the kind people do. When something long overdue finally lands. Then I'll let you go. You've got a long road ahead. Thank you, she said, for calling, for saying what you didn't have to. He cleared his throat, then clicked off without another word. She sat there for a while, phone in her lap, the city lights flickering against her window. It wasn't about the praise or the clicks. It never was. Sometimes the real impact didn't come from the crowds. It came in the quiet moments, the ones nobody sees, the ones where truth sneaks in through a side door. Unannounced, Crockett stood, stretched her arms, and looked at her reflection in the glass. Not a leader by title, but by action. Not someone waiting to be told what to say, but someone choosing her words carefully because they mattered. But she still had one final message to give, one that wasn't just for lawmakers, but for the country. Watching Sunday morning came soft and gray, with clouds sitting low over D.C. It was quiet for the first time in days. There were no flashing headlines, no buzz from incoming calls, no live segments airing her face with glowing or outraged captions. The storm had passed, or maybe paused. Jasmine Crockett sat at her kitchen table, nursing a mug of black coffee, wearing an oversized hoodie from her college days, no makeup, no blazer. Just her a notebook and her dog. Mika curled up on the rug nearby. She hadn't turned on the TV. She didn't need to. She already knew what they'd say, that the moment had gone viral, that she was making waves, that some were calling her the future of the party, and others were calling her dangerous. But labels didn't matter. What mattered was that for once people were paying attention to the why, not just the who. She opened her notebook, flipped past notes. Quotes, half-written speeches landed on the page with a sentence she'd scribbled weeks ago, long before the hearing ever started. Leadership isn't about winning the room. It's about being willing to stand alone in it. She underlined it once later. That afternoon, she returned to her office for a brief staff meeting. Dana was already at the table. Laptop open, emails flying. Luca followed close behind, dropping a printed list of requests on the desk. Interview, offers, school visit, invitations, campaign donations. Crockett raised a hand. Pause all appearances for the week. Dana looked up, confused. You sure? The momentum's huge right now. That's why I'm sure, she said. I want the message to breathe, not get buried in noise. Luca frowned. You think they'll move on that fast? They always do. Crockett said, that's not the point. She leaned back in her chair. I didn't say that line to be remembered. I said it. Because it was true. Whether people forget it in a week or quote it for a decade, that part doesn't change. She stood and walked to the window, eyes trailing down to the street below. People walking, laughing, unaware of the shift that had started inside a committee room just days earlier. This whole thing, she said almost to herself, has never been about Trump or Keith or the headlines. It's about what happens when we stop excusing things just because they're familiar. Dana closed her laptop. So what do you want to do next? Crockett turned around slowly, the weight of the moment still in her voice, but softened by something deeper, resolve. I want us to work on what comes after the mirror. Lucas squinted. Meaning. Meaning we've shown people the reflection, she said. Now, it's time to ask what they want to change. It's not just them. Us too. Everyone. No one spoke for a second. Then Dana smiled. It wasn't the kind you give a boss. It was the kind you give someone who just told the truth the hard way. That evening, Crockett recorded a short message in her office. No studio. No crew. Just a phone on a tripod and a single desk lamp. People have been asking me what I meant when I said, maybe it's not me you're angry with. Maybe it's the mirror. I think deep down, we all know what I meant. We all carry things. We haven't faced some personal, some political, some so woven into the system that we stop noticing they're there. But I said it because I believe we're still capable of honesty, not performative honesty. Real honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. So here's the mirror again, not just for the lawmakers, for everyone watching, for me. If we want better leaders, we have to demand better and be better and beat every one of us. She posted it with no caption, no hashtags. By the next morning, it had been shared over 5 million times. Because the truth is, sometimes it only takes one voice to wake people up, one sentence to stop the room, one mirror to remind us how much we've been avoiding. Crockett didn't need to yell. She never did. She just needed to say what others wouldn't, and if that made people uncomfortable, maybe it wasn't her they were angry with. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe. Let the message grow bigger than the moment. Let it be the start of something real.